Good evening. We might as well start our Maui work by returning to the two principles which we understand to be of such great importance in bringing to us our freedom from material sense, material from the limitations of the human mind, even of the human body. Freedom from living in the five physical senses, so that we may receive the impartations of the Spirit and live by grace. One of the major mistakes of the religions of the past 5,000 years is ascribing evil to God. That is, holding God responsible for the evils of this world, accepting the belief that God rewards and God punishes, or that God sends diseases to the earth, or is responsible for accidents, or as the insurance companies put it, that an act of God results in disaster, cyclones, hurricanes, tidal waves. As long as an individual believes for a moment that God is capable of an evil act or deed, or visiting evil on his children, just so long it is impossible to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. No one can love God who at one moment may reward and bless, and who, for no reason that we may be responsible for, may visit horrible sins and diseases, accidents and death upon us. As long as we believe that God can send a storm, we must believe that God can destroy innocent babies and children who often are victims of those very storms. And so there is no way, then, to love the Lord thy God except one way, and that is to understand fully, to become convinced within that evil has no foundation in God, that evil does not have its rise in God, that neither sin, disease, accident, death, famine, storm, drought, that none of these come forth from God. Only in the degree that you can remove the foundation of evil can you become free of it. And it has its foundation in the theological belief that God in some way is responsible for it. We know, of course, where this misconception of God came from. We know that back in the very earliest days of the Hebrew race when there was no spiritual wisdom, very little of spiritual light, that they turned to God for their blessings and they feared God for his cursings. You have this illustrated in the story of Noah and the ark, in which, because Noah was a good man, God was going to save him and instructed him to build an ark and fill it with cattle and birds and keep him and his family alive. And the same God that was going to do that for Noah was going to wipe out all of the rest of the race on the earth. Now, of course, it couldn't ever be possible for there to be only one holy man or one righteous man on earth. But if there were, try to think, where would man get his capacity to be evil? If God gave him that capacity, where would he get it but from God, and why then would God punish him? And if God did not give man the capacity to sin, where would he receive this capacity, since God is his Father, his creative principle, and the source of all there is? But they had no such wisdom in those days. They had only the darkness of superstition and ignorance, and therefore they blessed God when he blessed them. They cursed God when they were cursed, believing that blessings and cursings came forth from God. Now, with the spiritual light, which was the consciousness of Jesus Christ, we are presented with a different God, a God in whom there is no darkness, a God too pure to behold iniquity, a God who demands of us, of men and women, that we be so pure that we even forgive our enemies and those who despitefully use us, that we pray for our enemies. He presents to us a God who instructs him not to hold the woman taken in adultery in condemnation, but to say to her, neither do I condemn thee, thy sins are forgiven thee. And to a thief on the cross he is bidden to say, I will take thee with me into paradise this very night. This is the God that Jesus presents, the God that demands of us that we hold no one in condemnation, that we visit no punishments, no sins, no diseases, no death on the sinner. What then do we know of God? Is not God greater than we? Is not the love of God greater than any love that we can express? Is not the wisdom and the justice of God greater than the wisdom and the justice of man? Therefore, to ascribe evil in any form to God is to make God lower than man. For of man it is demanded, be ye therefore perfect. We would never consider any man perfect who visited sins and diseases and death on other men. Not for any reason. Even in this modern day, mankind is developing enough love, enough understanding of the spiritual nature, that he is even doing away with the death penalty for those who commit murder. Well, now, if man is that just and that considerate and that knowing, think of God. How then could God demand death of you or of me for any reason, when we are that righteous that we no longer believe in death even for murderers? Think of that. In the same way that you witness in international relationships, how that instead of holding countries in condemnation to their faults, we turn around after they have warred with us, we turn around and finance them back into prosperity. We lift them back into cultural wisdom. If we do that, how much more so is God? How much more of love and of intelligence and of life and of purity is there in God? And therefore, to ascribe evil to God is sinful. It's blasphemous. Now, most of the evils from which we suffer have their foundation in a universal belief that God visits those evils upon us, either to punish us for something, or to teach us a lesson, or for some other reason, even as it is given in funeral services, God is calling this dear one home. He usually calls them home by way of a cancer or consumption or being hit with an automobile. And it is blasphemous to believe that that is the way God has of calling anyone home. And so you'll find out that the foundation of the evils that beset you are in the universal belief that God is responsible for them, and you and I are ignorantly suffering from unconsciously accepting that belief. We may never have consciously thought of it, but nevertheless, because it is in consciousness, we suffer from it. Now, to begin to set yourself free from the penalties of these universal beliefs, you must set God free of all responsibility for the sins, the diseases, the deaths, the droughts, the lacks and limitations of this world. You must begin to honor thy Father which is in heaven. You must begin to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul, and love him in the realization thou art too pure to behold iniquity or to cause it. Thou art the very light of the world, and in thee is no darkness at all. Then, when you have a God wholly good, you have yourself wholly good. For I and the Father are one. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. All of the purity now, and the goodness, and the justice, and the love, and the forgiveness, all that you now have as qualities of God become qualities of man. For God and man is one. We go back to a former class in which we had a tumbler sitting on the table, and the question is asked, what is the nature of the tumbler? And even, is there a tumbler? Isn't it true that there is just glass? And the tumbler is merely a name of the form in which the glass is appearing? There is no such thing as tumbler. Tumbler is a name given to a certain form. But actually what is before you in the form of a tumbler is glass. Glass is its essence. Glass is its quality. How strong is the tumbler as strong as the glass of which it's made. How beautiful is the tumbler, as beautiful as the glass of which it's made. Oneness is our relationship to God. We are the form or the temple, but God is the essence of our being. God is the substance of our life, of our mind, of our soul, of our spirit, and even our body is the temple of God. Now, once you perceive this pure nature of God, in whom there is no evil, no propensity for evil, you now have man, pure and upright, in whom is no propensity for evil, no capacity for evil, no source of evil, for you have God and man as one. Thou seest me, thou seest the Father that sent me, for I and the Father are one. The Father is greater than I, because the Father is the substance and essence, and I am the form. Because glass is greater than tumbler, you can change the form of the glass. Change it from a tumbler to a saltfish or a pepper shaker. But the glass remains the quality, the essence, the character, the nature of whatever form it is formed into. And so God becomes the nature, the essence, the activity, and the law unto every form, including man, woman, child. Well, the nature of man, then, is the nature of God expressed individually. And therefore, if man is to cease being good and evil and to be wholly good, he must be the image and likeness, the showing forth of God. But then in order to be holy, God must be holy. In order for man to love his enemies, God must have no other feeling than love. For man to be forgiving, God must have no condemnation, no judgment, no punishment. You see then that the beginning of freedom for you and me is when we begin to have a God wholly good. A God from whom can go forth nothing but spirit, eternality, immortality, justice. Then, to be able to face every phase of discord, whatever form it may appear in, with a statement, "Be not afraid, it is I," would be immediately to take from evil its sting. Because it isn't evil, it is I. And in I, there is no evil. But if there is no evil in I, there is no evil at all. For I am the source. God is the source of all creation. And only God looked on this world, on what he had made, and behold, he found it very good. In other words, the goodness that was in God was in the goodness of his creation. But before you can wipe sin, disease, death, accident, poverty off this earth, injustice, you must first remove it from God as a propensity or capacity. Then you will have this universe showing forth God's glory. And God's glory will be wholly perfect. In the second principle, which is really an extension of the first, you have to have the realization of oneness as the glass and the tumbler, or as I and the Father are one. For this reason, that if you say God is wholly good, that still has no power in your life if you are separate and apart from God. God may be wholly good, but not you, unless you can perceive your oneness with God and accept, Son, all that I have is thine. Heir of God, joint heir to all the heavenly riches. Unless you can see that oneness, it would be like the Orthodox teaching that tells us that Jesus was wholly good, the Son of God, but not you or me. Then what good is Jesus' perfection if it isn't our perfection? It's of no value to us. Therefore, of what good would it be? What good would come from God being perfect if you and I were something or somebody separate and apart from God, subject under other influences? But you see, there it is. We are not something separate and apart from God. I and the Father are one. And Son, all that I have is thine, and I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. And therefore, in that relationship of oneness, the perfection of God is our perfection, and God's freedom from the capacity of sin, disease, death, lack, limitation is our freedom. Then you can say, too, why callest thou me good? Because whatever goodness there is being made manifest through us is God's goodness. Whatever immortality is being made manifest through us is the immortality of God. Whatever of love, whatever of justice, is the love or the justice of God. Whatever of intelligence, his understanding is infinite. What good is that to you or me unless he and I are one? Then his infinite understanding becomes the measure, the capacity of my understanding. Only in oneness does that happen. And so the moment you begin to declare the spiritual, perfect nature of God, you are declaring the infinite, perfect, spiritual nature of your own being in your oneness from God, oneness with God. Well, this, of course, carries us naturally into a principle of the infinite way, which I've said to you before must never be forgotten. And that is that God is not a power over evil. God is not a power over evil. And you have no power over evil. Even as Jesus said to his disciples, rejoice not that you have power over the devil. Rejoice only that your names are written in heaven. You're one with God. To believe that God is a power over evil is to believe that evil has an existence. And then you've either got to have God, the cause and creator of it, or you've got to have another cause and creator. And that does away with your omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence. So in order to be consistent, you must have only one God, one creator. And then that one, without capacity, for sin or any evil condition. That brings you, you see, to where you can readily accept the infinite way teaching of no power, none power. We don't need a power over sin, disease, or death, because these have no existence in God. And if they have no existence in God, they have no existence. Then they can only exist as beliefs in the human consciousness that believes in two powers. Even believes that God has two powers, the power to reward and the power to punish, the power to give and the power to withhold. Do you see how you finitize God, how you limit God, how you make God a little bit of a thing when you make him something that has the power to give us sunshine or withhold sunshine? Gives us the power, give him the power to give us crops or withhold crops. You see, you make God really into some kind of a man. Just a man with a little more power. But God isn't that way. God can't give sunshine and God can't withhold sunshine. God can't give us purity and God can't give us the capacity to sin. God can't give us life, and God can't give us death. God is eternal life, and that his life is the life of our being. He doesn't give it, he is it. He doesn't give it, he is it. God does not give us purity. God is our soul. And the soul of God being pure, our soul is pure. God doesn't give us wisdom. God is wisdom. But being infinite, God is our wisdom. There's no giving and there's no withholding. There is only ising. If there were a God life and your life, God life may be immortal and yours might be mortal. But if God is infinite life. And that means your life and my life. So you see, in order to free yourselves of the limitations of human sense, you must understand the nature of God. To know him aright is life eternal. And you'll find that this is true, that as you begin to know God as complete pure being, without any capacity to wipe out a nation or punish the sinners, a God that cannot visit disease on innocent people or guilty people, a God that cannot even permit conditions of disease or sin or war or poverty. Once you have that kind of a God, you have freed yourself, because the foundation for evil in your life is the belief that in some way God is the cause of it, the author of it, the creator of it, the maintainer of it. Know God aright, and you will have a God that you can love with all your heart and with all your soul, because you can look out on this world and witness its injustices, its sins, its disasters, and say, thank God, there's no God in those. And when you have removed God from them, you've removed the substance from them, and they begin to destroy themselves. They begin to dissolve. The world must awaken. It must awaken to the realization of God in order to remove the foundation of evil from our lives. They try to even make believe that wars are righteous and that God is on one side or another. God on the side of people out killing. God on the side of people slaughtering innocent men and women and children. You know God is not in war. God is not in the whirlwind. God is not in the storm. God is in the still, small voice. God is never in any form of force, not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit. And therefore, there is no evil where my Spirit is. For where my Spirit is, there is liberty. So it is then that you come to facing your fears. And when you face them, you'll find that you are fearing person, thing, or condition. And very often you'll find also in your worshiping that you're really worshiping person or thing or condition, as we have it here in Habakkuk. 3rd chapter, 18th to 20th verse. What profiteth the graven image, that the maker thereof hath graven it, the molten image, and a teacher of lies, that the maker of his work trusteth therein, to make dumb idols? Woe unto him that saith to the wood, Awake, to the dumb stone, Arise, it shall teach. Behold, it is laid over with gold and silver, and there is no breath at all in the midst of it. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. So you will find that your hopes and your fears are in persons or things. It might be gold, it might be silver, it might be land, it might be securities, it might be social security. But hope and ambition and faith and confidence is always in something external, and there is our idolatry, all of which disappears when you understand that the nature of God is the nature of your individual being, and therefore you have no need of person, thing, circumstance, for you embody your good. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. All that I have. Don't worry what somebody else has. All that I have is thine. Then, realizing that God is your very own being, how can you fear or love or hate gold or silver or germs or poisons or bullets or bombs? How can you fear that God's being, can be destroyed? And God's being is the essence, substance of my being. I may be the tumbler, the form, but God is the essence and substance even of my body. I shall not fear what mortal man can do to me. I shall not fear what mortal circumstance or condition can do to me. Why? Because God is the essence of my being, and in him there is no darkness. Therefore, in that of which I am formed, there is no capacity for negative in any form of any nature. But if I do not know the nature of God this way, how can I know the nature of my perfect self? If I do not credit God with being pure, how then can I say, I am the showing forth of God, therefore I am pure? For I cannot be any more pure than my source, my essence, my substance. Watch this simple principle. When you are witnessing evil in any form, in your own experience or in the world or your neighbors, smile within yourself and realize there's no God in this. This never had its rise in God. It has no God substance, no God law, no God life, no God being. It is the arm of flesh. And then let it dissolve itself and disappear from sight. Remove from it that which belief gives it life. That is the belief that it comes of God, emanates from God. God is responsible for it. But withdraw that. Be able to look at any situation and say there is no God in it, no power to sustain it, no spiritual power, no law of God to sustain it. Well, but there is no power but God. Then it must dissolve and disappear. And so it is that you can face any situation in life if you can remember, be not afraid, it is I. Nothing real exists but I and the forms or expressions of I. And whatever I am, all else is. Therefore, I can look at the pictures of evil and say, no, there's no truth in you. I need not be afraid. There is only I. Well, you see then that this removes idolatry. It prevents you from loving, fearing, or hating that which has form. Because you know the real essence of all form is God. And any erroneous appearing form has no existence except in the belief in two powers, or except in the belief that God caused it. And once you remove God as the cause and foundation and source of it, you have begun its dissolution. Well, these are the two principles which I know bring freedom to us more quickly than most others, maybe more quickly than any others. The moment we can see that God is no part of the errors of this world. You realize that we are given the book Practicing the Presence as the first book to recommend to beginners. The only reason we didn't start with it is we didn't have it in our earliest days of study. But now we do recommend that book to everyone starting on the path, and the reason is this. You must understand this very well. As human beings, we are living a life separate and apart from God. We're living our own life. We're living life the way we've been taught by parents or teachers or ministers. We're living our own lives. And there's some amount of good and some amount of evil, some amount of the positive and some amount of negative in all of our lives as humans. And we have no positive principle through which to live because we have never learned of the omnipresence of God. That where I am, God is. That the place whereon I stand is holy ground. That the presence of God is within me. Therefore, the very first step that we must give to those seeking on the path is this assurance that there is a God closer to us than breathing, nearer than hands and feet, that wherever we go, God goes with us. If we mount up to heaven, we find God there. If we make our bed in hell, we find God there. If we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we find God there. And so we bring to the young student, first of all, the assurance of a God in the midst of him or her, even as there is a God in the midst of you and of me. And we turn the student's entire attention on this truth of omnipresence and of the fact that this presence of God is the only power and that it is the bread, the meat, the wine, and the water. So that the very first step in every student's spiritual ascension must be the realization of an indwelling Spirit of God. Ah, yes. But after they have come to some little awareness of it, there comes this point that we have been taking up tonight. What is the nature of that God that is with us? Is the presence of God with us going to reward us? Is it going to punish us? Is it going to heal us? Is it going to visit iniquity upon us unto the third and fourth generation? And only after a student has really attained the realization that there is the presence of God in me, the Spirit of God in me, the indwelling Christ that Paul taught, only then can we begin to give them these principles of the nature of God, so now they can realize, since there is no place in God for evil, no ground in God, no foundation in God for evil, this God that is with me is a wholly good influence, a perfect influence, an influence for my freedom, for my joy, for the infinite nature of good in my experience. Now it is that we begin to reveal the nature of God. To try to reveal this to the young student doesn't succeed, because the young student is indoctrinated with his concepts of a God that gives and a God that withholds and a God that punishes and a God that rewards. And you can't at first break that through teaching. But after you've brought to them an experience of God's presence and they've actually felt it, then they can accept the fact that it's wholly good and in him is no evil at all. On the entire spiritual path, always the first step is this awareness of God's presence, this ability to live always as if God were bearing witness with me, God going before me. But once that is attained, your next greatest unfoldment must be this nature of God, because this is the step that brings freedom. This is the step that brings the release from what the Master called this world. When he said, I have overcome this world, you can be assured he had fulfilled that to know him aright is life eternal. To know him aright, not as you've been taught, but to know him aright as that pure being in whom evil has no rise, no source, no foundation, no cause. Do you see that? No power. Then when you've got that, you have got your freedom. Because if God isn't the cause of these things, there is no cause. For God alone is. law, life, substance, activity, being. This, then, likewise makes it possible to overcome idolatry, because when you have this God of purity, you have no person and no thing to fear, because there is no person or thing which has derived any qualities of evil, not from God. And what it has derived from mortal consciousness isn't power. If it isn't of God, it isn't power. Then we can say to it, in every appearance, in every form, so what? If it isn't of God, it isn't power. And so when we behold injustices, inequalities, sins, persecutions, revilings, we can always say, so what? Be not afraid. Be not afraid. None of this emanates from God. Therefore, Pilate, thou couldst have no power over me. The only power that you could have is what is derived from God. What isn't derived from God isn't power. And so we look at sin, and we look at disease, and we look at injustice, and we look at tyranny, and we say, so what? It isn't of God. It isn't power. And so you are going to witness in all of these international affairs, you will witness the dissolution of every one of these tyrannies, every one of these evils. They'll be dissolved, but they'll be dissolved because there are now people on earth knowing that they have no existence in God, and therefore they have no existence. They do not have their rise in God, therefore they have no power. See that? Just 10 righteous men in a city can save it. And just a few, or few hundred, or few thousand, who can face every situation of human experience in that realization, you didn't have your rise in God, you are not power. You had no foundation in God, you have no power. You have no law of God to maintain or sustain you. And then rest. Rest in His Word. Rest in this Word. Abide in this Word. Dwell in the secret place of the Most High. Always looking out at these forms or formations without hate, love, or fear. And why? Because if they don't have their rise in God, they have no substance, no law, no cause, no effect. You will prove in your individual experience the degree of freedom from these universal beliefs or claims. And the moment you do, remember that you are beginning to free your neighbor. Not because he asks for a treatment and not because you give him a treatment, but because you merely look at him in his sins or diseases and smile within yourself. This has no rise in God, no foundation in God. It has no law of God. Be not afraid. See that? As you begin to see how here and there a friend, a neighbor, or as I have told you, in the schoolroom, proven that disease has no power in the schoolroom if only the teacher is aware of the truth. So you will see that you become the power in your community. And there's no reason why anyone can't be the power in the entire world in proportion as they can, because even though they may not individually be all over the world, they will be imparting by their influence, so that there will be a circle of Christhood around the globe. And what is a circle of Christhood? Except the circle of those who realize that evil does not have its rise in God. Therefore, it has no law, no substance to sustain it. And abiding in that truth, watch it as it dissolves and disappears. That is the circle of Christhood. Those who do not accept evil as real, because they do not accept evil as having a foundation in God. Thank you. Thank you.